Hey there, this is Matt with State of Flux. Is it time to Potter more? Is it time to Potter less? Let's discuss. I actually want to get into a discussion about this new Harry Potter TV show and my thoughts on it, the trailer having which just dropped last week. And originally I wasn't going to talk about this because, like, why give it more attention? But so many people in my personal life have been asking me what I thought of the trailer, and I had enough to say that I haven't been seeing said online that is not very specific to maybe one individual or actors playing characters that, quite frankly, comes down to some pretty disgusting and racist comments. What I have to say, I think, is just a little bit different. So I do want to address it. The first thing I want to say, though, is I don't mean to offend anybody with any of my opinions on this. And if you are listening to this, I hope you do listen to the very end, because I think there's value in hearing the entirety of and totality of an argument before you lash out. So please do that. But I do also encourage you to have a discussion. That's what this is for. The first thing I want to talk about within this discussion is putting a pin in J.K. Rowling. And we're going to put a pin in the Rowling of it all and put that over here. I don't want to. We will come back to this. Never fear. Rowling will be addressed. But first, let's talk first and foremost about the trailer itself. I watched the trailer. It was kind of forced on me while I was watching The Pit on HBO. But the trailer was there and I watched it in its totality. And the first thing that I found most striking about it was how exactly the same it was to the original Harry Potter movie. And it's just kind of proof positive to me just how absolutely right they got that first movie. Regardless of what you feel about the movie, that film absolutely captures the tone, tenor, visual look that is established in the book when you read it. And in terms of that, it is quite honestly possibly the best adaptation from page to screen of a novel that I've ever experienced. Now, it's not to say that it's a profoundly amazing movie or that it is a perfect film in any right. It certainly is not. But it is the best example I can think of adaptation from page to screen. The art direction, the visual language is all perfect and captured amazingly. And it is insanely well cast. And this is also proven positive when you watch that trailer because of how little it is different. And we're going to come to this point in the near soon. But the biggest issue that you are going to have to overcome is the erasure of the original films and the people's attachment to them. And I think the biggest area you're going to have an issue with is three characters. Weirdly enough, Harry Potter's not one of them. Harry Potter, by his very design, as written as a character, is supposed to be that he's like the reader's character. So you're supposed to be able to project yourself onto Harry to some respect. So even though Daniel Radcliffe became the best actor of all of those kids in those movies, he's not the one that's going to be the challenge to recast. The challenge is going to come in the character of Rubius Hagrid, Severus Snape, and Hermione Granger. And it's because the actors who embodied those characters the first time around did so in such a way that they took total control and command of the characters to the point where when you think of those characters, even when you're reading the book, those are who you're going to picture, that's the voices you are going to hear. Now, this is not an impossible job. You can recast people. I said at one point that you could never recast William Shatner or Leonard Nimoy as Kirk and Spock because they who else could possibly do that? And if you watch my Star Trek 2009 review, you will see that they did the impossible. They actually found people that fully embody those characters. Pine more so than Zachary Quinto, but if you had told me that Chris Pine would have equal status with William Shatner in my mind as that character at any point in my life prior to 2009, I would have thought you were insane. But they did it. So you can recast people and change the mind. I think Heath Ledger's Joker is another example of that. But that's going to be the problem. The biggest issue is trying to reset people's brains for the casting of those characters who are absolutely iconic to film and to literature. And the actors who portrayed them the first time around just did it so right. Robbie Coltrane is Hagrid, and he will always be Hagrid. And it's not lost on me, when he passed away, it was him who you saw. It was him as Hagrid, and they did the "You're a wizard, Harry" moment. Same thing when Alan Rickman passed away. Alan Rickman, they showed a couple little shots of who he was at the Academy Awards, but at the Academy Awards they showed him as Severus Snape. Emma Watson is still with us, and she's retired from acting, apparently, it seems anyway. But she has done great work to separate herself from Hermione, but that also doesn't change the fact that she just kind of is Hermione in everybody's mind. The challenge for these young actors, and the adults for that matter, is going to be trying to erase that. And from what I watched in this trailer, Nick Frost was not able to do that. You really didn't see much of Hermione or get a sense of what her performance is going to be like totally, and you really just saw a glimpse of Snape in a couple of little shots. But, so I'm not going to touch on them. Also, wading into that territory of people's dislike of the Snape casting, some of which is founded in firm, interesting criticism, and a lot of it is just racist rhetoric that is kind of disgusting and disappointing. So I don't want to dive into that because that's quite frankly gross. What I will say though is, when I heard that Nick Frost had been cast as Hagrid, I was like, you know what? They may have done it. I can think of nobody else currently working that might be a better Hagrid than him. He is a great actor, and he's an actor that people don't give credit for his true honest ability to act because of how good he is at playing the schlub in the Cornetto trilogy. And so I was actually kind of most excited when that trailer dropped to check out what he had. And Robbie Coltrane, he is not. His performance doesn't even capture the feel of his character from the book of being, for want of a better word, dim, uneducated man. He speaks too firmly and too confidently, Nick Frost, in this incarnation. His English and use of language is too strong, to the point where I'm like, it took me a moment to even recognize that was who was supposed to be talking. And, sure, they got his look down kind of okay, but he also just kind of looks exactly like the costume and characterization of Robbie Coltrane. So I don't think that they are going to be able to leap this hurdle. And unfortunately, it's not the only hurdle that they have to leap within the comparison to the first movie or couple of movies. When I was reading these books when I was younger and these movies were coming out, I was like, oh man, there's stuff that they missed in these books that I really wish we would have gotten on screen. And that happens the further you get into the series, the more that becomes commonplace. However, that first book is really strikingly similar. There's going to be a couple little differences. They truncated the whole stuff with Norbert the Dragon. They eliminated the midnight duel or whatever. But by and large, it's pretty identical. And so Season 1 is going to kind of just feel like you're watching a really, really overlong version of the first movie. And honestly, Season 2, for when they cover Chamber of Secrets, is going to do the same thing. And also the adaptation for Book 3 is pretty solid too. Yes, it's far shorter than that book is, but in terms of what was adapted, a lot of it is covered. You're gonna miss some stuff in the movie. You miss some stuff with the importance of going to Hogsmeade, the multiple visits to Hogsmeade. But really, it's the Marauders side of things, which happens in the last fourth of that book, that you're gonna see anything kind of take form into being its own thing completely, with its own complete identity, different from the movies. And that's asking a lot of an audience, because it's really not until the fourth book where things are going to be radically different right from the get-go. And they've already said that this is not going to be an annual TV show event. They're going to do it in a couple-year periods, over the course of 10 years. So you're asking audiences to hold on for what could be 3, 4, maybe even 5 years before you get to anything that's radically different from the movies that you have already seen. And I just don't know that audiences are going to hold for that long for something new. And this is where we can pick back up with the Rowling of it all. I also don't know that she is going to be quiet enough or to not make any controversies in this time period that is not going to offend the audiences to the point of no return. Because there's a fair amount of people out there who still don't really know about what's going on with the Rowling of it all and her transgender hate that is just disgusting, and how she's utilizing her money and profits from this very franchise to actively harm a community of vulnerable people. And so that in and of itself is going to be a challenge. You're already seeing the response to it from a lot of people in the literary and filmic communities who are already pushing back from it. But in all honesty, that is a small pocket. I work at a movie theater, and I know that controversies around a movie don't necessarily hold true once the movie itself starts playing, because more often than not, a lot of people just casually watch things and they don't learn or read about any of the people involved with making of or behind the scenes, including J.K. Rowling. But it's not only audiences that are going to have to stand whatever the fuck she's going to say. You're also asking a lot of the cast and crew and filmmakers and stuff like that to sit complacently. You're even beginning to see the John Lithgow yesterday had a quote saying he's surprised that J.K. Rowling keeps doubling down on her transgendered ideals or anti-trans narrative that she's constructed. And so there's that. You're also asking literal children to have to suddenly speak to the politics of what she is espousing that is going to haunt them for 10 years, to the point where, what if one of these kids just doesn't want to have this conversation anymore? Like, they can ask the publicists and stuff like that, please don't ask these questions during interviews. But that's if the people doing the interview choose to obey that want or desire. And I promise you now, not all of them will, and these kids are going to have to speak to that. And I feel bad mostly for the kids who kind of entered into this likely not knowing any of what she has to say. And what if one of these kids, or adults, recognizes within themselves that they are themselves trans, and then are suddenly they going to be the center point to her vitriol? Like, this is just maddening to the point of, why are we doing this with her creatively involved? Now, yes, it sounds like it's just a producing credit in honor only of her title for having created the franchise, sort of like the Kazooies on being credited on every single episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, even though they had absolutely nothing to do with it. It's just sort of like a honorary credit. Or more recently, Scream 7 by having the Radio Silence team, you can check out my review, the Radio Silence team credited in their credits. They said they had no creative input on the final product of that film. So I do think it's largely that, and probably in response to the fact that they signed her on for 5 Fantastic Beasts movies, and then they were the ones that severed that contract when those movies started radically underperforming, largely because her screenplays were becoming less and less skilled in their execution. And so, in an effort to make nice, this is all just subjective, or my subjective opinion of probably what happened behind the scenes, but I think they gave her that title just to keep her on board. But the fact that they're not just severing ties with her, they already own the property in its film rights, I just don't, I don't understand that. So that's a big ask, right? To have this person who's actively creating controversies that because she feels she is absolutely right about that, her stance, which to be clear, I don't think she is. You're asking audiences who over the years are going to be hearing about this more and more, as well as the cast, especially some of the young cast as they grow older, might start educating themselves on gender politics and gender studies, and recognize a problem with the person that they are ultimately working for. And I think that's where this comes on. So, to reframe this conversation, you're asking audiences to watch something that they've basically already seen before, and asking them to hold on 3, 4, 5 years before we get to anything that's meaningfully different, assuming they are just adapting the books as is, which by the look of that trailer kind of looked like they were. I don't think it makes it to season 4. In all honesty, I think it gets 3 seasons and then canceled, which is going to be ultimately incredibly ironic because the 4th one is the first time that it would actually have any weight or meaning behind anything in doing a readaptation. And that's the killer irony of it all. Do you guys think I'm on off base with any of this? I would like to hear your thoughts. I do want to argue one point that I often hear, which is that for people that already have these books and these films that they've already purchased, I have physical copies of all of the movies and all of the books and whatnot, I do still think there's quite a bit of value in them. And I, in fact, read all 7 books to my daughter, who's 10 at this point, and she loved them. And I think that despite Rowling and what she's doing for with her money and stuff like that, is incredibly destructive and hurtful and mean-spirited, and so people want to completely turn away. I get it. But I think there's a good teaching tool here as well. A lot of us are active in activist kind of communities in some way because we read these books, in all honesty. The ultimate irony with Rowling is she trained an entire generation of readers to question authority and not agree to the stories being written before them that they are told are right, but are truly being manufactured to harness wicked ideals. And a lot of people compare her to Umbridge, but I would compare her more to her own character, Rita Skeeter. She is reframing these stories and weaponizing them in such a way that can instill fear and gross detest of individuals and communities. That is a very Rita Skeeter thing to do, and she's doing it knowingly and knowledgeably that she is that. But I think this is exactly where it becomes an important teaching tool, because when reading this books, my daughter Willow really took on to the questioning authority. She latched on to the activism of the character of Hermione and stuff like that, and she learned the lessons that we all did when we were younger from these books, because there are some pretty valuable lessons. Some of it hasn't aged well, for sure, and some of it can be repainted in a different context, knowing how she behaves in real life. But that's just it. As long as we teach our younger generation that is reading these books that, hey, the person who wrote these books, who crafted the ideals that you are currently learning and are adapting to, is also not the hero of her own story. Quite frankly, she's the villain of it. And she's very easy to compare to one or two of these characters. Sure, she is a lot like Hermione, and she's always said that Hermione and Dumbledore were very much self-posit characters for her. A chance to espouse wisdom, or how she views her own femininity through Hermione, and the bookish girl kind of energy that Hermione gives in these books. And I think that remains true, I do. But I also think that it's very easy for her to write a character like Umbridge and Rita Skeeter, because she has a lot of that in her as well. And using that to illustrate to my daughter that even though you really, really like something, and you may fundamentally agree with it, and I think that you can take great lessons from it, the people who create these things aren't idols for us to put on pedestals. They're actually cautionary tales of what one could be if they start following a path that is mean-spirited and activating our lesser traits to the point where we double down on them. And I think there's quite a bit of positivity one can learn from these books as a teaching tool for young readers. It's just up to the parents to take the time and spend that time with their kid, to have these healthy discussions and get pushback too, because my daughter did have some questions and pushback against certain things that I had to say, or the books had to say. She was not a fan of how the book kind of like fat shamed some of the characters, and I agree. Also, I think that's sadly very of its time and was commonplace back then. But I think, yeah, I guess I've talked about this a lot. What did you guys think of the Harry Potter trailer down below? Try to be healthy with the conversation and let's not attack. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Peace.